So the health department is pulling out all the stops to get to the bottom of the deadly cases of suspected food poisoning in Gauteng. This is following the tragic death of 6 children in Soweto. 80 health inspectors are now investigating what the department believes is a chemical agent responsible for the incidents. But to help us understand the direct link between contaminated foods and such incidents, we are joined by Toxicologist Gerhard Verdoorn. Gerhard, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I think I want to start with this. The health minister saying that he's concerned that this is a matter of national security. What do you make about those utterances?
I agree because, like I said the other night also on the program, I told you so. We've been fighting about this issue of street pesticides and illegal pesticides in the hands of people that don't know what they're dealing with for years. I've been pleading with the police since 2010 to take action on street vendors who are selling LD-carb in particular, which is still the major street pesticide, because I've seen the human deaths, I've seen the casualties in hospitals, I've seen the dogs being poisoned by syndicates, and now all of a sudden the Department of Health wakes up. And it is a national crisis. For us to lose our children to a pesticide which is totally banned by Agriculture Department is socially and morally unacceptable in our country. And I'm glad to see at last now the state is taking action, sending people out to go and see what's going on. And they're going to get the surprise of their lives over the next couple of days when they go around the streets to the vendors and all the spaza shops to see what is sold in those places, right amongst the foodstuffs that are bought on a daily basis by the poor people, like the children who take it home and unsuspectingly become exposed to chemicals that will definitely kill them.
Yeah. You know, here's the challenge, though, Gerhard, is that for people that live in the townships, and I think about, you know, informal settlements or townships, really, you do have pests, right? Rats, roaches and such. And so we need to talk about what needs to be done to deal with that, because there's a need now for those pesticides, right, in a lot of these communities. But what you're talking about is unregulated, dangerous pesticides and illegal. Talk to us about which ones we're talking about exactly.
Well, we have a lot of registered pesticides in the country. It's about 3,000. And even for the poor people, we have rodenticides, which are very affordable in small containers, which we know are registered. If they apply them correctly, there's no risk to them and they can kill the rodents effectively. But what we see is in the country, there's a massive surge in these illegal pesticides, which are brought in from Zimbabwe and as far as Nigeria into the country. They are packaged in small little plastic sachets or small little plastic bags, unlabeled. There's no warning on them. There's no indication on them. They just call them haloferimi or they call them two-step and stuff like that. And the poor people don't know what they're buying. They don't know the gravity of what they got in their hands. And very often when you walk into a spaza shop, these pesticides are lying right amongst the foodstuffs. Last week, I went out to traders and I found 2 local ladies there who sold the stuff right amongst their foodstuff. And I also found a Zimbabwean national that's scattered away because they know that I'm searching this place every now and then.
Yeah.
It's about 1/4 kilogram of the LD-carb. So this is what the problem is. Not our normal pesticides, but the illegal pesticides which are decanted into unlabeled containers without any warning or any labeling on them. That is our issue.
Yeah. So we're talking about, and if you in many communities, you may very well know what I'm talking about, haloferimi. And in some cases, it's called 2 steps. So who's dropping the ball here from a regulation point of view, an access point of view, and even just from, you know, law enforcement officials? Who's dropping the ball?
I don't want to point a finger at any state department because it's a national crisis. All the departments are understaffed. There's a flow of foreign nationals into the country which are undocumented. They arrive in Port Elizabeth by the busloads full, no documentation with them. And along with them, they bring these illegal pesticides along with them. So it is Department of Health, Department of Agriculture, it is the National Police Service, it is our Metro Police, and I've worked with all of them when you do street raids. But the flow of this chemical is so vast that I don't think we can actually stem the tide of the stage. We need a mammoth effort. So I'm not going to point a dirty finger at anybody. But I do expect the police officers, the African police and the Metro Police who walk the streets to go and check every vendor out there. And if they find these pesticides, simply confiscate them, take them to a place of safe custody, and they can contact CropLife SA because we have a recovery scheme for all pesticides, and we will pay for the disposal of those pesticides. But it needs to be taken out of the hands of people. And you must understand that an official from the Department of Health or Department of Agriculture does not have powers of arrest. The powers of arrest lie in the hands of the police. And LDCARB is a totally forbidden chemical in South Africa. You're not even allowed to possess it. And my question is, if the police then find these people in possession of unlabeled LDCARB coming from Zimbabwe, why don't we see these people being arrested? Why don't we see these undocumented foreign nationals being deported? Because they are threatening the lives of our South African citizens that are the future leaders of the country that are now gone. So I'm speaking some very harsh words here, but I call upon the state authorities and the police in particular to take serious action to clean our country out, because every week I hear of 50 kids dying. It is heartbreaking to hear that families are losing their children because of a foreign chemical sold by people that are not supposed to be in our countries, and even by our own local people, and not knowing what they sell, leading to the death of large numbers of children and also adults that use the stuff for suicide and mix it up in the food and make accidents.
Yeah, and I remember a story that we covered just a few months ago of learners in Ivory Park that took their own lives, and it was from taking poison that is so easily accessible in so many of our communities. So really, really heartbreaking. I'm keen to hear your thoughts on just the wording that's been used by the National Department of Health. They're calling it a chemical agent that is most likely responsible for the spate of sudden food-related illnesses. Is that skimming the surface and not being direct? And I think it's important, obviously, to be direct when speaking to communities.
They speak the right truth because they speak the right scientific language, because there's been allegations for months now. If you remember, some months ago, we heard about 800 people in the Gauteng area suffering from some form of food poisoning. Now, food poisoning is where you get a bacterial infection like Clostridium or Salmonella from food went off. And that is usually the thing in a poor country like ours, where people buy food that is old, but it's not life-threatening. You seldom, if ever, lose a patient with food poisoning. They do get very sick. But what we're talking about now is actually poisoned food. So the department is right. There's a chemical agent which is responsible for the condition of the children we're seeing going to hospital now. And if you look at the fatality rate, it tells me it cannot be a typical bacterial food poisoning. It's a chemical poison in the food, and that is what it's pointing out. And if I remember what I saw at the vendors last week, the chemical was standing open right amongst the little biscuits and the little frizzy things that the children buy and the lollipops. So the department is right. It's a chemical agent. And I hope they know what they're looking for, because in many cases, when I went out to them, they had no idea what they were looking for. So they should actually be educated and informed on what to look for, how to confiscate, how to keep them safe, because even if you make dermal contact with that stuff, you are in serious trouble. And then to take it to the police into custody and let us get this all together in the country and incinerate the stuff and rid the country of this chemical, because it's killing our...
Yeah, I want to ask just one last question, Gerhard, before I let you go. And that is, you talk about how this chemical is killing our children. And I actually want to perhaps even make a call out to parents and communities that are watching right now about, whether or not, there's also the question on whether or not it should be legal for us to buy these chemicals from street vendors in our communities, and perhaps you can respond to that. But for the sake of parents and even spaza shops that are watching, just how deadly is this chemical agent, two-step or halipirimi, that we're talking about? I suppose it's important for us to really emphasize, what's at risk here.
If you think about, let's take an adult man that weighs 80 kilograms in body weight, 1/10 of a teaspoon of that halipirimi or the two-step is sufficient to kill an adult man in a period of 20 minutes. That's the gravity of what we're dealing with. Now, if you talk about a typical rodenticide that is labeled and marked with a trade name, you're not going to be able to kill a person with 1/10 of a teaspoon. You will probably not even pick up a symptom in the person. This stuff is a deadly acute toxin that is going to kill the person. And to latch onto your first statement there, it's even illegal for anybody to buy it. So the chemical is completely illegal. It's like having nuclear arms in your possession. It's totally forbidden. So we want the stuff out of the market. And I also want to call then on the country who makes the stuff and exports it to Zimbabwe, which is the main origin of the stuff coming to the country, to stop making it and to stop exporting to Africa, because that country is killing our African people, and I've got a serious issue about that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for speaking to us, Gerhard. I think this has been a really important and eye-opening conversation. Gerhard Verdoorn, there, toxicologist, is speaking to us about really the chemical agent that is behind some of the horrible food-related deaths that we have recently seen, as well as illnesses. All right.